Hello, everyone, and welcome back once again to the Tetracast. This is RPG Site's weekly podcast where we get these site staff together to talk about our favorite genre of video games. Hello, my name is Brian. I'm back. The regular
Nice
host,
to meet you.
the normal host. Yes, good to be back. Joining me today, you heard Adam Vitale.
Hello.
We have Josh Torres.
Oh man, the host is back. Oh my god.
We have James Galizio.
Hey, folks.
And Chow Min Woo.
How's it going?
All right. Before we get started for realsies, I just do want to chime in at the start here and say a big thank you to basically everyone else on this cast, especially Josh and Adam, but everyone here, for Josh for hosting, Adam for basically carrying the load in terms of publishing the podcast, doing the stuff that I would normally do when I was absent. Josh and Adam have also been very busy just keeping up on the games that they're previewing and putting up the news on the site. And I know James has also been working on the Monster Hunter coverage after the Sunbreak release. And then Chow is also working on stuff behind the scenes. You heard him on a recent episode about his Live Alive impressions. It's just been, I don't know, I felt like I picked a very, very busy time of year to step away for a second. And you guys, in your own ways, have all carried the torch in incredible ways. So just thank you so much for...
The last 3 weeks have been sponsored by Square Enix. Thanks, Square Enix.
Yeah, I saw obviously all the news about Crisis Core Remaster, all the news about Rebirth and the Xenoblade and everything else that came out of the that specific Nintendo Direct. We've got a bunch of game releases in the next 2 weeks. The Stranger of Paradise DLC is next week. There's a lot. And now that I come back, this week actually is a little bit of a lull. So maybe let's ease me back into it. It'll also be a nice breather for the rest of you guys who have had very busy, very packed podcasts over the last month as we kind of get out of that big summer hump of all the announcements for later in the year. I guess I'm still just a bit surprised that we haven't had anything from a Nintendo General Direct, but maybe Xenoblade is kind of their big game for the year. Well, not kind of, is their big game for the year. And so that's, they just put the eggs in that basket, kind of like they did back with Breath of the Wild.
Well, they basically just had a press release with the new trailer and date for Bayonetta. So
yeah,
that's kind of
we did that.
That's their October game.
It's been an interesting thing of how Nintendo has done it because they basically been piecemealing their information between the Xenoblade Direct and the Direct Mini third party that actually had a lot of relevant stuff for us, and then obviously the Bayonetta 3 news. So it's kind of a weird thing where it could have been in a quote unquote main direct, but it would have felt awkwardly placed because if you had a quote unquote main direct combining these news bits, a good 25 minutes of that quote unquote main direct would be Xenoblade 3, and would people be happy for that for a main direct? We saw how that went with Smash Brothers Ultimate when it was unveiled back when they were still participating during the E3 period years ago. So it's kind of I kind of am okay with them kind of piecemealing their info like this, and I know people want a main direct, but I'm kind of a more old fashioned person. It's totally cool that Bayonetta 3 was just a press release and a new trailer. People got excited and life went on.
So during my break, I guess I've just been playing a lot of different things. Obviously, over the next week, by the time we meet for next week's podcast, we'll be able to maybe talk about the Stranger of Paradise DLC. We'll have Live Alive, yeah,
Live Alive will be out.
And then obviously right after that, well, I guess there's also next week the Octopath mobile game. That's either next week or 2 weeks, and then of course Digimon and Xenoblade, on top of each other. But for this week, it's all of you are still working on the games that you've been already able to talk about on the podcast in previous weeks. It's up to me to talk about what have I been up to for the last month. And a lot of it is kind of games that we've covered on the podcast, but I hadn't gotten around to yet. So in no particular order, I did finish Chrono Cross. That is a game that I was looking forward to. And I think I've stated on the podcast a few times that I really wanted to get to it. And I finally did. Obviously, we've had a few podcast episodes back in the early May timeframe where we talked about Chrono Cross a lot. So I'm not going to dive too deeply into it here. The main thing that I want to say about Chrono Cross, if I had to boil it down to my top 3 impressions, is that one, the music is just fantastic, just impeccable. I can't put enough superlatives on that. I had listened to the soundtrack of Chrono Cross before ever playing it. It's been in my library for years. And so it's really kind of fun to put it into the context of the scenes in the game that play it.
I also think a soundtrack that goes wrong with Yasunori Mitsuda. There's a game called Valkyrie Resolution, which is awful, but the soundtrack still carries the game.
Is that the one that Josh played?
Valkyria Revolution?
Yeah, I played it.
Oh, you both played it.
Yeah.
Oh man.
We don't wanna
Yeah,
talk about
I wish he didn't like remind me that game existed. Now I'm just
Yeah, but the composer still saved the game somewhat.
I mean, I guess the music was good, but that's pretty much the only thing you can say about it.
That game is one of
I don't
the
know. I don't know
only
if it's saving
games.
the game.
That game is one of the only games where I skipped every single scene, like every single one. I did not care. I don't know why, but like the cutscenes in that game move like molasses. Like the camera would just slowly pan like millimeters at a time, and like characters would just like talk so slowly with
Oh.
huge breaks between like sentences. I'm just like, I don't. This is garbage.
It's I don't know. Thanks, Shaw, for making me remember. I'm gonna try to forget about it again.
But anyways, Chrono Cross has great music.
Yeah.
Also, so like going into Chrono Cross, Adam had played it a couple times and had played it pretty much right when it launched with the remaster in April, and he kind of had. Adam is a fountain of knowledge in terms of like where all the characters are and all the things you can do, or knows at least where to find all that information. Obviously, lots of websites have kind of guided the game up and down. I kind of went into the game with the mindset, all right, I'm just going to play it organically, so to speak, and get what I get and find the characters that I like and just play it that way. Which was in a lot of ways, it was kind of like relieving that I didn't want. Sometimes I feel too like completionist. I'm like, no, what if I miss something? So it's kind of nice to put that aside right from the get-go. I will say that if I was like, I don't know, 12 to 14 years old and I had like a summer to play Chrono Cross and no responsibilities and it was like the one game I had, I could see myself playing that game basically like over and over again to see all the different ways that things can turn out or how the different outcomes can change based on. Obviously that game is kind of designed to play played like that anyways, with the way the different endings work, just like in Chrono Trigger, but almost to a greater extent with the way the character recruitment works and things like that. But I just played through it once. I got an ending. I did look up how to get like the true ending or whatever, just so I could kind of see it for my one time through.
The other ending is kind of funny because like you literally just beat the final boss and there's like nothing, not even like a 2-second scene. You just beat the boss and then credits. Like nothing. That's it.
There's something kind of quaint and like classic about that though. Like you beat the game, what do you want?
Game over.
That's kind of I think that'll be enough on Chrono Cross since we've kind of covered that game a lot. I really like it. I don't know if I'll be singing its praises a ton for like remaster of the year, but it kind of depends on what its competition is. I haven't really thought about it, but we'll see at the end of the year what it's up against in kind of that category. I am not 100% done with it, but I've made a lot of progress in Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak. I know that both Josh and James were able to talk about this game significantly as it released in late June, talking about the end game mechanics and the afflicted monsters and all that stuff. My main takeaway with Sunbreak right now is oddly very similar to the Chrono Cross one. I really think like normally for Monster Hunter music, there's like a few tracks that I think are very evocative or very nostalgic, or just a certain track that stands out over the rest. But in Monster Hunter Sunbreak, I've been like impressed every single time I fight a later game. Like I don't know if they're specific to the monsters, because early in Monster Hunter Rise, it's like specific to the region you're in, but then they start adjusting it where it's more specific to the monster you're fighting. I believe it was either Sergios or Espinus had like this almost like horror themed, like very like percussion heavy soundtrack, which I thought like this is different, but it fits the fight a lot. And then I fought a Rajang that had like a very like almost like tribal chanty sort of soundtrack. I'm like, wow, this is neat. I fought the Malzeno, obviously the flagship dragon, had a unique backing track behind it, and I was like, wow, like I normally don't pay this much attention to Monster Hunter music, but in this game I was. I haven't really got.
Yeah, how far are you in it? Like what master rank and stuff? Like what have you been fighting?
I just defeated Malzeno, and so anyone who's played any Monster Hunter game, that it's a flagship monster, but at least, well, I always want to be careful, like speaking as if I'm an authority on Monster Hunter when I'm in the company of James and Josh. So I'm not, but I had gotten used to, at least in World, where you have the flagship monster, but then there's always like the threat behind that you end up fighting, whether it's weird zombie wind dragon at the end of Iceborne. I don't remember.
Kashala?
Yeah.
Saraswalda.
Shara Ishvalda, yeah, like Shara Ishvalda behind
Oh yeah.
Velkhana, and so like Malzeno isn't, spoiler, the final boss of Sunbreak. I don't actually know who the final monster is, so I can't even spoil that. But I'm between that, so I basically have been like formally introduced to the afflicted mechanic in a way by fighting Malzeno.
Well,
I'm
good news, Brian. Your assumption that pretty much every Monster Hunter is like that is well founded, because pretty much every Monster Hunter is indeed like that.
Yeah, I'm not surprised, and I think that actually works pretty well. To I don't know, it kind of allows a nice framework for the story there, because you
What
kind of think.
weapon have you been using in Sunbreak? Have you been sticking with?
So
yeah.
I've been using the Nargacuga switch axe, which is a high affinity poison one, and I'd kind of found a build for the base game that I have not been very clever with master rank. I've just been pretty much upgrading my gear with the master rank version of the same gear, except for the I had some Valstrax equipment from normal rank or high rank that I haven't fought yet in master rank, so I had to like kind of shift a few things around, but basically just trying to do a high affinity poison build.
Have you just been doing like your tried and true playstyle, or have you like messed around with like the switch skill swap or any of the new switch attacks?
I tried using the switch skills swapping stuff, but the thing is I just don't find a lot of use for it, because I'm like, I like these switch skills. I want these on my bar. I don't want to. I don't get a lot of use of switching between them. Like the Switchblade has a. It's called. What's it called? It's called like Fearless Assault or whatever. It's a charge forward that it has like super armor or whatever you want to call it, where you don't get knocked. You still take damage, but you don't get knocked. You can do it through roars and things like that, and that's super useful. And it kind of has a lot. It gives you a lot of movement too that you can do on the fly, even if your weapon is unsheathed. So it's been like, this is like, I use this ability all the time, and it uses a wire bug. And now that you're not using wire bugs to run up walls as much, I feel like it's easier to get that third wire bug on your bar. So I've been using that a ton. Like I could switch off of this, but I don't think I need to. So I haven't really like experimented much, mainly because I guess I'm comfortable with what I'm using.
I mean that's totally valid, and you know I know a lot of people have done that. It's like, you know, like that I like being comfortable with what I'm like used to.
I have been doing almost all of my progression through the join feature, where basically you just do the join request. Not creating a join request for a mission I'm kicking up, but finding another one. And it almost feels like it's really cheap in a way, or it's like it's kind of like susceptible to being abused. Because there's been a couple times where I join a fight and it ends in like 10 seconds because I joined right at the end. Like, oh, that wasn't my intent, but I guess I'll take it.
I guess I'll take it. You know, easy maths.
Yeah, so I guess like there is no I don't say there is no. There's some things that I thought were inherent. So I've only played World and Rise. And like, whereas World has like the flare mechanic, is it called flare? Where once you see the monster, you can then request assistance, but it doesn't quite work the same in Rise. I'm like, oh, was that World specific, or is Rise a change up of the formula? I guess I don't really know for certain, because in Rise it works a bit differently. I've been basically doing that and doing all my fights in multiplayer, and it's been really fun just to see like oh wow, a sword and shield player. That's like a, I don't know, like a rare find. Oh, another longsword player. That was me in World. Like I don't blame you. Longsword's fun. Lots of great swords, a few charge blades, and then a lot of hunting horns. So I'm seeing a lot more hunting horns in Rise and Sunbreak than I ever did in World, and they're like a godsend. I feel like they're like the cleric of Monster Hunter. I'm like, oh god, thank God we have a hunting horn player, and they're good.
Oh yeah, support hunting horn players are a blessing. They make fights so much easier.
Yeah. So when I was fighting Malzano, which you had mentioned, introduces the afflicted mechanic where you have to fight the clusters, and if you get the affliction on you, you're incentivized to keep attacking and stay on the offensive, which I think is pretty cool. But also, like, I had a hunting horn player with me that whole fight, basically keeping all their health topped off the entire time. Like, oh, this is easy. Like, I can play like shit and still have a great time. So I've been enjoying Sunbreak a lot. I've been not quite doing it as exhaustively as I had with World. With World, I was basically no-lifing it. I was doing every single quest. I was trying to follow up all of the as they added monsters to the game. I was there day one, like seeing all the new gear or whatever. Sunbreak, I'm being like, all right, I had my fill with World. I'm still enjoying Sunbreak, but I'm playing it a little bit more casually and kind of not quite mainlining it. If I see like I had to fight a few Alumatron, the muddy boy, to get some of his gear for the morphing skill. So I've been doing a few like extra fights, but mostly just kind of doing like the main line through the game, and it's still been a great time. And I'm hoping to finish it by this weekend so that I'm basically ready for the deluge of late July games.
Yeah, that's cool. Like I was trying to ask earlier, like the comparing like your experience with like the base Rise game, like going from low rank to high rank, and then now with some breakthrough master rank. Have you been enjoying it more, like going through like master rank compared to the base game, or do you like you still feel like it's more of the same, but that's cool.
I feel like the jump, it could be experience, it could be the game itself. I feel like the jump from high to master rank in Sunbreak wasn't quite as stark or as difficult or as noticeable as it was in Iceborne. It felt like a little bit more gradual. Like monsters don't feel like they take as long to kill. I feel like the decorations that you can make and the gear, like I'm surprised sometimes the amount of skills that are slotted to this gear. Like, wait, I get all 3 of these plus a decoration slot? Just stuff like that, where it feels like there's tons of options. Where before I felt like in Iceborne, I had to be like, all right, I can either focus on like damaging abilities, affinity abilities, critical abilities, or get my health and defense up. There's really, you can't hybridize much. Where in this game, I feel like I have tons of extra slots and I don't know what to do with it. I guess I'll give myself speed sharpening or stuff like that. Like, I feel like I have a lot more options and choices where I can be like, I've already got my Master's Touch gems. I've got enough attack boosts to get myself the percentage boost. I've got like the weakness exploits. Plus, now I have slots for just health boosts or things like that. And then some of the decorations I just recently unlocked, maybe not end game decorations, but the tier right before that, like the 4 slot decorations. And it's like, this gets you level 3 critical evade or something like that, like from a single decoration. Yeah, it's a 4 slot, so you have to find something to put it in. But it feels like there's just like an escalation of abilities in Sunbreak where I'm like, wow, I can't imagine like what end game builds look like. They just have like probably like half the skills in the game or something. I'm sure like once you get to the end game tier and I actually get into like the afflicted monster fights, that you're going to want to make sure that those are all slotted in to the appropriate places and you have a good build that synergizes across all of those abilities. But as I'm just progressing through Sunbreak, I almost feel like spoiled for choice in a way, which is a good
Yeah,
feeling.
yeah, that's a good feeling. I think people get too hung up on like trying to like optimize every single deco slot and having to, because like at the end of the day, like I feel like when you're optimizing for Monster Hunter, it's more so because you want to like like speed run the hunt and go for like super low like times for hunts. But like and unless so it's not about like, oh, I need these to survive the fight. It's like I just want the fight to go faster, and that's not necessarily like a bad thing, but it like I think there's enough like options and build options in Sunbreak and other Monster Hunter games really, but in Sunbreak specifically here where you can just customize and have fun and play the way that you want to. So like if you want to go for an element, build for this, like it's okay to go for that and like try to like build multiple elements to exploit the element weakness of a monster, and less so than like, oh, it always has to be affinity, always raw damage because I just want to get like super low fast sides. Like you don't have to do that. You can just experiment and have fun the way that you want.
Well, I remember when is it Almutron? Not Almutron. Alatron. What was the elemental dragon that they added to Iceborne near the end?
I think that was Alatrion.
Alatrion.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Well, some of these names are kind of similar. So I remember when Alatrion was added to Iceborne, the way you fight that is to do like an elemental build. I forget the exact mechanics for why he's more susceptible to that. And I remember people were like upset, like I have to upend my my Master's Touch Teostra armor build that I've been carrying since like Iceborne launched to actually fight this. How dare they? And I don't know. It was a bit silly, and I thought it was like kind of fun to have to change my build there. And this really isn't a Sunbreak note because it was in the base game as well. But the fact that you can just craft decorations is a godsend. The fact that the RNG is mostly or entirely just limited to the amulet is I remember doing some of those event quests in Iceborne so many times where you fought like the giant Jagras or the giant lava fish to try to get your decoration rolls to finally get your attack boost or your weakness or whatever, or handicraft or what, those rare decorations. The fact that you can now just kind of craft it, still a little bit of RNG. You got to get the materials to craft it. But I don't know. It feels like it synergizes well with the being able to build how you want. Like, oh, okay, if I want to try an element build or a poison build or whatever, let me just see what decorations I can craft to help me there, because I'm spoiled for choice for slots and where to put these. So yeah, it feels like there's just a lot of open-endedness in terms of not being able to change out gear or armor or decorations a lot more, with a lot less of a hurdle to jump over than it was in World and Iceborne.
Yeah, I mean, that's cool. That's cool that you're having a really, really great time with it. I'm glad to hear that.
And even though I say that I'm like mainlining it, I still have like 60 hours in the game. I saw that I saw that you and James were well over the 100-hour mark. So I probably won't get there, but I like, even if you're not being exhaustive, there's a lot of game there, and it's obviously kind of cool to have that. The other game that I've played that I know that we've talked about on the podcast a few times in a few different contexts is an indie game that came out in early June. It has a terrible name, unfortunately. It's called Symphony of War: The Nephilim Saga. We've talked about this a couple times, mainly around the premise that Scott, contributor to the site, previewed it from his time at PAX East in March or April. So this is a game that's clearly built in the framework of pre-Awakening Fire Emblem. So we've talked in the past about how there's so many indie games that are built in the Final Fantasy Tactics framework. Well, this is basically an indie game built in the GBA SNES era Fire Emblem framework. It has an overwhelmingly positive rating on Steam. I always try to at least get a few games from indie developers in the conversation for RPG site. Like I've talked on the podcast and in end of the year discussions about games like Fate Tactics and Bug Fables and Fell Seal. I like to try to give them their due. So I'm like, all right, maybe Symphony of War will be a game, especially since it's so highly regarded, to be in that conversation this year. The way that I'm kind of preambling this, you can kind of see potentially where I'm going with this. I do think the game is good. So I'll try to be an optimist and talk about the things that I like about it first. So it is a Fire Emblem like. You have a selection of units that you play like from an isometric perspective, like on a grid of different classes, and the classes will tier up 2 or 3 times. There are some, it is like Fire Emblem Sacred Stones, where you can have a class fork into multiple different ones. But however, it is more like Advance Wars, where each unit actually is a union of up to 9 units. So you'll have your main character who's named Devoa, who is a kind of a lord, basically, a Fire Emblem lord. But then you also assign him soldiers that can fill out his union, or whatever you want to call it. And those can be like mages, archers, riflemen, armored units, things like that. And the game is very mechanically sound in terms of the design around this feature. So that's the main, if there is a non-story selling point of this game, it's the way that the units work and their unions in a Fire Emblem-like context. Because imagine a 3x3 grid. You can put your main unit, the leader of the union, anywhere in this grid. And then you have to surround him with supporting units. So some of this works in kind of obvious ways, where if you put an armor unit in front, they will cover the units behind them. If you put archer units in back, they can still do full damage. There's a couple interesting twists where, for instance, if you have like assassins or rogues, they can ambush enemy units. So when they attack an enemy unit, they actually hit the enemies in the back row instead of the front. So that way you can kind of if you're fighting an enemy unit that has armored units in front, you can attack them with a squad that's full of skirmishers to kind of get through that more easily. There are magic units. Like I hope I get this right. Like fire mages will attack in rows. So basically they will attack a row of the 3x3 grid front to back. And the lightning mages will attack in a column. So they kind of, one does horizontal and one does vertical.
Interesting. Yeah. Okay.
And then there are other units that have like a a wide sword where they swing in an arc where they can hit like units side to side. So there's a ton of different like micro. If you like to micromanage, this game is kind of really perfect for that because
Are there any units that can like push, or units like backwards or forwards can like control their positioning?
No, the positioning
Okay.
is fixed, but there's a lot of ways to kind of manipulate how you damage units in the other group.
Okay.
And then there's like not all units are the same size. Like if you've got a dragon unit, they take up more. You can't fill a union with 9 dragons. You can only have 3, sort of thing. So and things like that. And this is basically the most enjoyable part of the game is basically micromanaging. By the end of the game, you can have an army that's including your leader units and all their supporting units, like of 100 units or more strong. I think there's an achievement for getting up to like 150 or 200. So that would be like
have you beaten this game or like are you
yes,
just, like,
yes,
near the end of it?
I've beaten it.
I'm interested. Like, how long did it take?
Let me check my Steam playtime. It was like 40 or 50 hours. But
Not too
some
bad.
of that might be idle time. I have a bad habit of leaving games on when I fall asleep.
hmm
I have 53 hours, assuming idle
Okay.
time. I'm going to say 35 hours. So it's long,
Okay.
or it's a good length. So that's the combat mechanics, the squad building mechanics, the army mechanics is the best part of the game. Parts of the game that are fine is the artwork. I think is kind of interesting. It's built in RPG Maker, so it has that very kind of mobile-y version of Final Fantasy 4 through 6 look sometimes, which isn't great. But when you're playing, that's like for the story scenes and the dialogue. When you're playing like the actual battles and maps, it looks more like a high definition 16-bit game, which is I think actually pretty clean looking and pretty good. But it's just that the two art styles juxtaposed like that is a little bit incongruent. Going from
What do you think about the portraits?
I thought the portraits were fine.
I know
I guess
Scott didn't like them. He thought they were too like realistic.
They're a little bit of an acquired taste. So like in Fire Emblem, it's basically a portrait with the dialogue like underneath it in a text box with characters facing, like I think it's 2 characters on the left, 2 characters on the right, sort of thing. It almost feels like there's 2 zoomed in.
I think Scott also mentioned it does the faux pas where there's a character with an eye patch, but the eye patch will flip eyes depending on what side the character is on.
I didn't catch
they just
that.
mirror it.
That's funny.
There are a couple interesting things that like I wish I knew going in. So I like micromanaging, or at least like in spurts. So early on in the game, I was like, you can get generic units, and then obviously the game gives you like a selection of story characters. The thing is that it gives you a lot of story characters, which is good and bad in a lot of ways. It's good because it kind of gives you characters of a lot of different classes and gives you opportunities to see like, how does this class work? How does this class work? But early on in the game, I hired a bunch of units. So you have like a recruiting table that's semi-randomized, and units have both stats, obviously, and then like traits. Like they might have a trait that says that they take less damage when they're on defense or whatever. So they might be better for like an anchoring a fort or whatever. But then you start getting so many like story characters that I'm like, all right, I don't want to box these story characters out because sometimes they're required. So I ended up leaving my generic units on the bench. Basically, you can get through this game and have tons. You never need to recruit a single. You don't need to. The game throws so many units at you that you never need to recruit a single character, which sounds like that's good, that's convenient, but it kind of makes like the whole recruitment process where you have even like the selection of units from the armory or whatever from the mercenary list kind of pointless in a way. Like I almost wish the game gave you fewer units so that you had to engage with that system a little more.
Okay.
What else?
Yeah, I wonder if there's like interesting like challenge ones where people try to get through the game without using any of like the story units and can only just go with generic recruitment people.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes
the challenges like that in other Fire Emblem games where I'm only going to use mages, or I'm only going to use people on horseback or whatever. Those are always fun to do.
Mm-hmm. the trait system is kind of interesting because you get like scrolls that allow you to teach traits to units, but then also they can have inherent traits. There is a resource that you have to manage called like leadership, where basically the higher a leadership, I hope I get I hope I get how this works right, because it's actually a little bit complicated. I believe the higher leadership a unit has, the more capacity they have, because you can't just immediately put 9 units in a union. You have to, you work against like a cap that you can't go over, like a capacity, and it's determined by the leadership of all the units in the union. So certain characters are more suited for being leaders of a union than others, typically your story units. There's actually some mercenaries that say like this mercenary has higher stats, but they will cost more unless they are the leader, sort of thing. So there's a lot of interesting kind of resource management there. And then there are resources that you might be on a so all the map objectives are typically pretty how do I word this? The very classic Fire Emblem map objective is to seize the fort, right? And some games are better at this than others in terms of the variety of the objective from battle to battle. This game's somewhere in the middle. You have some maps where you have to like have all your units reach a certain area that's guarded by an enemy platoon that you have to get around. There's some that it's just you got to seize these 3 forts. There's some where you have to like get across a river, but it's not. A lot of times it is kind of seizing the fort on the other side of the map, and you just kind of push there and get it. So the variety is not great, but it's not the worst that I've seen in these types of games. So it's fine. Where this game really falters, I think, is the story. The story is just kind of awful. I think it's awful in a couple of ways. One, it's a sort of game where they feel having more story beats makes it a better story. It goes at lightning speed and like it doesn't ever take time to like dwell on anything of consequence. It just goes in a sense where it just feels like nothing matters, just because everything just goes forward. For instance, that might be like a weird way to word it, but for instance, the world in this game has 3 continents. One of them is a desert continent called Scion, which has like a lot of like horseback archers and things like that, kind of like a very nomadic people, kind of like Mongol inspirations, things like that. You get a character in your party early on named Jules, who is from this place, and that's kind of all you know about him. He's like, oh, he's from Scion. He's an archer. He's one of my units, whatever. Then like 20 chapters later, this person doesn't have a major role in the story. You go there, and then the game is like, surprise! This character is actually the long lost son of the former king, your royalty, and just kind of like throws it at you like, oh, this guy's the king of this place now, and then it never touches on it again. So that's kind of what I mean by that, where it just like throws in the story beat, like, by the way, this character's king. Okay, was that a cool story beat? I hope you like that, because we're not going to bring that up again. It's not really going to matter. And this game
obviously going to be brought up at the next Symphony of War game that the developer is working on right now.
Yeah, and the other part about the story that I don't really like is that it is incredibly black and white. There is basically a good church and a bad church. The bad church are cultists that worship an evil god who is evil, and you got to beat him. And there is no nuance, not even like a little bit.
That's better than some RPGs where the entire church is just evil. At least this has a good church and a bad church.
Yeah,
they write evil well. I mean, like technically, if you think about JoJo, I mean, there's some people who are like pure evil, like Dio, and I don't know. I'm okay with that. It doesn't always have to be a gray villain all the time.
Yeah, well, it's not. I kind of agree with you. Like, it's always kind of nice to have villains that are like, not every villain has to be sympathetic in some way to be like good. Sometimes you have just your evil asshole. Like, I'm thinking like Metal Face in Xenoblade 1, who's just evil just because he's a dick of a person, and that's kind of fine. Like, that can be written in a compelling way, but this isn't that, because it's like an evil god that an evil cult worships because they're evil. And even in Fire Emblem games with very basic stories, like Fire Emblem GBA, the 7th game with Lynn, Eliwood, and Hector, like even that game, which is a very straightforward plot, has a little bit of nuance with like the 4 fangs and how they interface with Nurgle. Like, they're being manipulated by him. They're not good people, but they're being, used for the as a means to an ends from the true antagonist. This game doesn't even have like that. It's just these cultists take over the country and you got to take it back. And it does this by just throwing plot beat after plot beat in rapid succession, and where nothing feels like it really matters. Luckily, I'm the sort of person where whether or not the story of a game is good or not only minorly affects whether or not I enjoy the game. So even though I'm like, wow, the story is a disappointment, it doesn't make me dislike the game, because I thought the way the game plays and although the way all the systems work was interesting and smart and well implemented and good. It's just that, wow, I can't believe they dropped the ball on this, because it feels like, I don't know, they could have made a few tweaks, almost like less is more, where you could have taken some of the story beats out and just let it go a bit slower, or dwelled a little bit longer on some of the story beats you did have in there, and I think it would have been a better game for it. It also, like, the characters, almost all the characters who have portraits are protagonists, where antagonists are almost like faceless for the most part. They're just like faceless cultists with a name. So it almost feels like you don't have an idea of like who you're fighting or why. Just like, oh, the general, like in Fire Emblem games, normally whoever is the general at the fort that you're capturing has a portrait and has been introduced at least for that chapter, and you kind of know who you're fighting and why. Where in this game, it's almost always just like a nameless, oh, this guy is this class. This guy is an armored class, but he has higher stats. I don't know his name. It doesn't matter. He's dead now. I took the fort. So like, I felt like they could have had a little bit, like, even if they had like more recurring antagonists that isn't just an evil god that's evil that you got to beat, that could have helped the story along. But that, I guess that's my my comprehensive thoughts on Symphony of War, from like good to bad, is the way I introduce those concepts. Is it gonna be like all those other games that I mentioned earlier when I was introducing this game? Bug Fables, Fell Seal, and Fate Tactics are indie tactical games. Well, I guess Bug Fables isn't a tactical game. So those are games I enjoyed more, and I was hoping that would occupy that kind of space in my mind for this year, for this game. But unfortunately, it doesn't quite. It's decent. It's good. I think I'm glad I played it. It just doesn't quite reach the same heights, and I'm not really going to be arguing for it to get a ton of like look in at end of the year stuff, when I was hoping that it might be. So I guess I'm a little bit disappointed, but still walking away thinking that I'm glad I played it. So this kind of falls in kind of like that sort of territory range for me.
That's cool. I mean, I think thanks for the insight, because I really didn't know what to expect from this game. Like, I have it in my Steam library, and I do intend to play it at some point when I do get some free time. But yeah, that's at least, when I watched, like, trailers for it, the thing that did stick out to me is like the micromanaging your units, and like basically building up your squads, and that's the thing that really spoke to me the most, along with like any of like the auxiliary systems of like enhancing your units and like bonuses and passives and all that. But it's good to know that at least in that aspect, like, that is the a shining part of it.
Yeah, and to leave this on a more positive note, that is clearly like the most well realized part of the game, and I think it's really clever. I think there's not quite like even Advance Wars has kind of the same sort of idea in terms of like each unit on the map represents a squad, but this game kind of does it in a way where you have a little bit more control over it, and has a lot of interesting interplay between like how magic and armor and weapons work. And there's also one other thing I didn't mention, is that what sort of units you put in a union or in a squad determines what sort of squad it is. Like if you make sure that your squad is only like light armored units, your squad is only like archers or skirmishers or assassins, that squad ends up being called a light infantry squad, which makes them more mobile in like marshes or in rough terrain. If you give them armored units, they just become generic infantry, so they don't have any bonuses or penalties. If you make them mounted units, then they have some additional movement and some additional capabilities for being a mounted squad. So
there are incentives to make it more specialized, rather than just like trying to be a jack of all trades.
Yeah, and then some of the traits for some of the leader units might say like, for this leader unit who is a cavalier on horseback, any other cavaliers on horseback that use melee weapons that go in his squad cost fewer resources. So like certain leaders will incentivize comprising your squad in very specific ways. So yeah, long story short, if you like to micromanage, if you like to deal with like fitting pieces together and trying to use your limited resources to fit your squad perfectly. This is the sort of game where I spent a lot of time in menus just like shifting things around and tinkering, and finding that strategy pays off once you're actually in a combat encounter is a good feeling. So the game is well made on that front. As an RPG, it's good. Just with a few caveats that I'd already mentioned in terms of disappointing story and things like that. And that's pretty much been my week. So I finished Symphony of War. I finished Chrono Cross. I think I'm going to finish Sunbreak. If not today, then by tomorrow. And then, unlike most of you, having preview access to either Live Alive or Xenoblade, I haven't. So I'm probably going to grab the Live Alive demo because it has the carryover into the main game. So I'll probably grab that because I want to try to get through Live Alive because it has like a week head start and everything else before Xenoblade drops, which from all previews that I'm hearing is a massive game, which is no surprise for anyone who's played any of those Xenoblade games. So I want to try to make sure my plate is clear by the time that launches at the end of the month.
Luckily, Live Alive isn't that long of a game, so I imagine you can knock it out before Xenoblade for sure.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, no, thanks for allowing me the time to just give you the start of this podcast here. Like, what is Brian up to? But the 3 games that I've all launched in the last few months. So giving them all a look in here from my perspective, hopefully giving some honest opinions on how I felt about all 3 of them. Yeah. So now you're all caught up.
Cool. The Brian catch up. You're getting games done. Like you're just finishing them left and right.
Which is good because I'm not always great at doing that.
It helps by the end of the year. It's like, did you finish this game? And you're talking about it.
Well, yeah, that's the one thing is that I am like kind of motivated to finish games in the mindset of I want to be able to have my say, have a look in because it's whenever we put in our listings together at the end of the year. It's more art than science because not everyone plays everything, and then you have games that only one person's played or games that everyone's played. And I try to want to make sure that I cover as much as possible so that I am as fair as possible when when trying to put that thing together.
It's tough. Being in that position is like no one else has played this except me. How do I do this?
Then I always play games like Wild West or Weird West, sorry, where it's like, all right, I think I'm the only one that's played this, but I'm probably not going to vouch for it because it was merely okay. One of these days I'll play something that I will feel as strongly about as you have on some of your solo endeavors and be like, this is how Josh feels when he has to hold the mantle for this singular game. All right, before we go into the news section for this week, which is a little bit lighter, does anyone else have any other games that they've played in the last week that they A, want to talk about and B, are allowed to talk about?
I wish I could, but I've been eyeing this little Noah game that I want to get to, but because of what I'm working on.
I did play a little bit of that.
Okay, really? To tell me a little bit about it.
I just kind of picked it up yesterday because friend of the site, Sean Musgrave, was kind of raving about it on Twitter. So I was like, oh, it's $15. I'll give it a shot. I like roguelikes. First off, it runs perfectly on Steam Deck, like absolutely zero issues. It's nice because like the one thing with the Steam Deck that I'm it's not bad, but it definitely could be better is like the D-pad. But Little Noah, even though it's like a 2D side-scrolling like roguelike, it has analog movement, and you're gonna want to use the analog stick anyways. So it works out.
Before you continue on that, I messed with the Steam Deck for the first time yesterday, and it's desktop mode, and oh my god, it took me a long while to figure out how to navigate desktop mode because you can't really use any of the analog sticks to move the cursor around or the buttons to access anything. Everything is done with the right trackpad and to do a left click, it's to press in that. So it's easy to kind of slide your finger as you're pressing it in, so you'll miss what you're trying to click on that.
What you should do is if you open up Steam in desktop mode, you can actually set a desktop configuration for the layout, and you can set it so that the left trigger and the right trigger are left and right click.
I need to mess with that because just the default experience, because I didn't know you can do that until now. The default experience is kind of very jank.
I want to say by default it does that because it's
No.
based off the Steam controller default config, which has the right trackpad for regular trackpad stuff, and then the left trackpad. You can kind of scroll with it if you do like a clockwise or anti-clockwise, well, counterclockwise, like kind of rotation.
My
on the,
vanilla experience with this, when I just like, when I had to set up Steam Deck for the first time and it did its updates, when I got it like a few weeks ago, and I messed with desktop mode for the first time, not touching anything else and not knowing about that feature. This was my experience. So, and I tried, moving with the analog sticks and pressing these little buttons, and it didn't do anything. It only respond to the right trackpad alone. And I guess the quote unquote right click is clicking in the left trackpad, and like that was jank. And then it comes equipped with like the Firefox browser in its desktop mode. So like, okay, let's try this out. And then when you click like a text box field in it, like the on-screen keyboard will not appear. You have to manually press the Steam button and X at the same time to like bring the on-screen keyboard up to like start typing stuff. And then when the on-screen keyboard is up, that's when you're allowed to use like the D-pad and like the face buttons to like type in stuff, or you can use the touch screen as well for that. But if there's like anything on the screen that like they say they have to get the bookmarks tabbed down, like the keyboard screen will not overlay it. Like sometimes it'll be behind it, and like that's just like a fact of life that you have to deal with. Just like just typing with like half of it being covered by like say the bookmarks list. So,
yeah, like I do know that the keyboard is somewhat intelligent in the sense that it'll try to like it'll be either on the top or the bottom of the screen depending on what the system thinks will block less text, but obviously that only helps some of the times. Other times it just doesn't do anything to help.
it's just one of those like observations. Like I hope they really refine this experience in desktop mode, because I think it's really cool that it has a desktop mode. But I hope they I don't know what Valve's plans are and what their priorities are with this. But like I just really hope they eventually, make that experience in desktop mode much, 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 much smoother, or at least more apparent, and make it default that like you should be able to use the mouse cursor with the analog sticks instead of like going to a menu that I didn't know about until now of like setting it to be like that. Like I think
just making it more like intuitive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would say that, and I don't want to be that Linux guy that says, "Oh, it just use a terminal" or stuff like that. When it comes to the mouse, I think the only real issue with using the trackpad is having to click in with it. If you have the mouse clicks assigned to the triggers, I just honestly don't know why someone would want to use the analog stick instead.
I mean, I like, it's just more options, right? Like some people would prefer a trackpad, some people would prefer navigating with an analog stick. Like,
yeah,
that's just more options, and not necessarily a bad thing. It's not an either or; it could be both, and that's okay.
Yep.
Anyway, go on about Little Noah. My bad.
Anyways, it runs fine. I guess I should talk about the game itself. One of the core conceits of it is that you don't have weapons. Instead, your attacks are based off of these champions that you basically use alchemy to gain under your control, because Noah, the main character, is something called a soulchemist.
Yeah,
I don't play Grand Blue. I'm assuming that's something that's a Grand Blue thing, because
I don't know, but
No.
before you go on, like just to be clear to everyone, Little Noah is it was like shadow dropped after the Nintendo Direct Mini that came out recently, and this is like developed and published by Cygames. This is like kind of the successor to like an old Cygames mobile game that went out of service many years ago, and that old mobile game was like a Clash of Clans clone almost, or like that was the framework of it. While this one is just a brand new game, straight up, like it's like a 2D roguelite action RPG that you're talking about here.
Yeah. So anyways, you get these champions and they have different attacks, and you also have a bit of a wrinkle where you have your regular attack combo on the X button, and then on your Y and B button, you can also slot champions in there for a different attack.
Okay.
That so every champion has like a standard attack for a chain, and then that like cooldown attack. And at any time, you can just swap out which champions you have on which button and the order of their attacks on the regular attack combo. And it's interesting because obviously different champions have different attacks. Some of them will have like an uppercut type deal that'll like kind of bring you up, like elevate you. There might be some that are just standard melee attacks, or just like, okay, it's like a sword slash or like an axe swing or something like that. And then some of them will be more like magic based, or some of them might have additional attributes. Like you'll have some champions that have an elemental attribute to them, and so their attacks have a chance to give an ailment to an enemy. Like it might freeze them, it might burn them, etc., etc. And then as you're going through these randomly generated dungeons, or well, levels, I say dungeons, it's basically just levels. You'll find stuff like accessories that will give you buffs to specific stats. Like this one might make it so that you have higher defense. One might make it so that you deal more damage for fire attacks or ice attacks or wind attacks. Some of them might make it more likely to give enemies a status ailment when you're doing an attack that can give a status ailment. And all the while, there's all these different sorts of rooms you can run into. There's like puzzle rooms where it's like more like not really a puzzle, but more like a light platforming challenge. And as you get further along in the game, the platforming challenges do get harder and harder. Every so often, you will run into a boss room and you'll fight a mini boss or a regular boss. And then, like, your first time going through these sections, like in the story mode, you'll always run into the same boss your first time. And then after you've cleared a boss at least once, there's a chance for a different boss to appear. So, like, the first time you fight the first boss, it's just like this kind of like knight, this like small knight with like an axe. And then the next time you fight him, it might be that same knight, but it could also be this like queen type enemy that has more of ranged attacks that are ice attributed, or it could be this like assassin looking enemy that has dual blades that's wind aspected.
Okay.
So it's like
I gotcha.
things change, and like as you like you said, it's a rogue light, not a rogue like. So every time you die, you do get resources that you can use to upgrade your ship back at the base, which
So there's like a persistent upgrade system that like
Yes.
carries with you after death. Okay, so it's not like
Yeah.
just a fresh run every time.
And you
Got
can
it.
also, like, one thing is that you can use these items to actually level up attributes of your favorite like champions. So that way, if you get them, it's like, okay, I like to use this champion a lot, so I'm going to upgrade them, or well, upgrade my bond with them. That way, when I get them, they will deal even more damage than normal, or stuff like that. And then there's just a lot of little things that add up over time, and it does feel like they've kind of struck that balance where no matter how well you do in a run, you're going to be able to unlock something. So it feels like you're always progressing.
Is there like
Um,
any? Well, I don't know if you've gotten to this yet, but have there been any variations to the stages? Do they change out the layouts of the stages, or are there like any branching paths to like go to another stage at a certain
there
point?
things are to a certain extent randomly generated, but there's not that much that changes each time. Like there's slight variations. It's kind of more like the way that Returnal randomly generates stuff.
Okay, got it.
So it's yeah, that's a really good way to explain it. Basically, it's not properly randomly generated rooms. It's more like they have templates and then they connect them together and whatnot.
Okay.
Are there any checkpoints or anything where you don't have to start from the beginning? Like whether or not there are kind of depends on how strong the progression systems are. But I know some way that some of these roguelikes kind of, if you get far enough, you can kind of get some sort of checkpoint that you can start at as a manner of progression as well as upgrading your character.
If there is, I haven't run into it yet. One thing that Josh was asking about earlier, and I'll kind of like just talk about, is that there are branching paths in the sense that the way it works is that the first stage in a world is going to always be the same thing. Once you get to the end of that stage, first, only one gate will be open, but there will always be two gates that you can eventually choose from that go to slightly different stages with slightly different enemies, slightly different obstacles, and slightly different rewards. And you can actually check the gates themselves, and they will tell you, okay, this one right now gives you access to more like champions. Like you can find more of them to upgrade your attack power, but this one will give you access to more gold or something like that. And then one of the upgrades you can eventually get at the base is actually making it so that these areas have multiple different buffs to them, and then you can spend this resource that does carry over between playthroughs, I believe, to upgrade a gate. So it's like, okay, if neither of these are upgraded, I'd prefer the one on the left. But if I upgrade the one on the right, I would much prefer this one versus if I had upgraded the one on the left and stuff like that. So there is a little bit of a wrinkle there to consider. It's like, okay, do I want to spend this resource now, or do I want to save it for later when I'm further into a run, or something like that?
I kind of like that it gives you multiple avenues for progression. So it's not quite the checkpoint thing, but you upgrading your character or upgrading your like traversal option. That's not quite the right word, but having more say in what resources you're able to get per run by having like these multiple gate options that you unveil as you go through your different multiple times.
And I assume that like your main character themselves, like they level up as you play through the game.
They don't level up. The only thing that improves is that the more of, well, pretty much anything you get, because you get accessories, you get champions, you get these crystals, which I guess are kind of accessories too, but they're considered separate. Everything that you pick up in the game has a power rating, and not only do you get do individual like champions or accessories or whatnot have their own stats, the higher your power rating is or ranking is, the higher your overall stats are, because it gives a multiplier, as far as I can tell. So it's like you start off with like around like 100 or so like power, and then by the end of like the second like stage, you might be at like 1200 power, and it's like it gives you a ranking. Like at the start you're like D ranking, but maybe by the end of the second stage you're a C or a B rank.
Almost like a Destiny light level or whatever it was called.
Kind of.
Okay.
Well, there's a handful of games that have like some sort of battle power indicator based on what gear you have slotted or abilities.
Yeah. And one thing I do want to say is that it's really neat how so far the bosses really kind of force you to make use of all of your movement abilities, because you have access to a double jump and you have access to a dash that can also be used in midair. And then one of the upgrades you can get is a kind of dash attack that lets you dash in any direction in a 360 degree around you, basically anywhere around you, which is cool for a number of ways, because not only is it a dash attack that just lets you move wherever, but it will automatically refresh your cooldowns upon use. So if you're fighting a ton of enemies, you can kind of do a thing where it's like you exhaust your your combo, and then it takes like a second for it to recharge. But if you want to keep a combo chain going, because there's one of the things that some rooms will do is that they will have an additional challenge every so often. It might be clear the room without being hit. It might be deal enough damage in a combo, or it might be get a certain hit ratio in a combo. Like, let's say get a 25 hit combo before things drop.
Okay.
And obviously that's a lot easier if you have that dash, because it resets your hit combo. So it also counts as a hit. So it's one of those things where
You're kind of like bumping into them to
Yeah.
continue your combo.
Yeah.
So the return of bump combat, you're saying.
I guess something like that.
This sounds like a game that we could easily cover on the site if we wanted to. I know. I'm not saying it's a busy time of year. I'm just saying it kind of fits the purview.
Yeah. I'm thinking about writing up something when I'm done, because I don't think I have anything else on my docket for a bit. So, but it is.
It sounds really interesting the way you're describing it. Like, I already had my eye on the game. Now I'm just like, man, I really want to get to this.
It's only $15. I mean, it's.
I know, but I also want to complete Nirvana Initiative too. And if I get this game before completing that, then
yeah, Nirvana Initiative is a good game.
You know how it goes.
Yeah.
On one of the previous podcasts, did you had Cullen on to talk about that, right?
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah, so I also missed that. But yeah, it sounds like that he really enjoyed that one.
I tried to juggle it with Xenoblade 3, but the other just, you kind of really have to double down on it. So now I'm just barely getting my feet wet again. I was like, okay, I remember what happened in it, so it's not like I'm totally lost. I'm just like, it's been a while since I've been able to like play it again. So yeah, I after I get Nirvana Initiative done, maybe I'll get Little Nova and because I want to get to Live Alive when that releases as well, and then Digimon Survive is right there as well, and just
I'm going to Adam's RPG list on the site, which you should check out, and reminding myself what's in August.
Soul Hackers,
yeah, Soul Hackers. Mm-hmm.
I remember that coming in August. I don't remember what else is coming in August.
A couple of those Nice America things, La Pucelle and Rhapsody.
Oh yeah, that's right. It's right around the corner.
Mm-hmm. A lot coming up.
Yeah, no kidding.
Well, thanks, James, for giving us a little bit of insight on your time with Little Noah.
Yep.
And with that, we will move into the new section of the week, because I think all the other games we'll have to put on the back burner until we're allowed to talk further about them. So the news section of this week, most of this is upcoming either release dates or dates to put on our calendar for upcoming news to be announcement, all that sort of stuff. So this thing that I have listed first, I might need to ask James or Adam. This is kind of an interesting context. So we learned back in March through a Famitsu interview that Fuga Melodies of Steel 2 was going to be announced in July. So I don't know why that March announcement didn't count as the announcement, but we were expecting to get more news. And then we learned today, or in this last week during Japan Expo in Paris, that Fuga Melodies of Steel 2 is formally announced. And we will see more information on July 28th during the first anniversary special broadcast from the first game that released last year. So as far as I can tell, we still don't have any other explicit details about this sequel. Is that the case, or am I missing anything?
I saw something that said that they did formally say that Fuga 2 will be out next year.
I think they mentioned that in Japan Expo, but like not in the actual like announcement. So I don't know whether to like, because it was hearsay from like people who went to that event in Paris. So they could have said it was the next year, and then very well might like reiterate it when they like share more information about it on the broadcast. But
it's just this sort of cadence is just a bit interesting. They mentioned it in a magazine, then confirmed on Twitter. Then they announced it, saying, "Yes, it is a thing. More details to come on this date." So it's just kind of like
we basically got like a logo for the Melodies of Steel 2 and like a silhouette of like the tank.
Yeah, I don't want to disparage it though, because we talked last year that Fuga 1 basically was almost like an instant cult classic where anyone who played it thought pretty highly of it, but maybe didn't sell as well as they'd hoped. But it sounds like the plan to go forward with the trilogy is still in place. So it's good news all around. I mean, I don't want to say
Yeah.
like, oh, this is weird that they
And
announced a
this is
sequel
like
this way.
time too for people to give it a shot, because along with this announcement, CyberConnect 2 also released a demo of the first Fuga Melodies of Steel game on basically all platforms, because it
Let's
released
save
on
transfer.
pretty much all modern platforms. And yeah, and it supports save transfer, so people can play up to chapter 3 of the first game, and then if they're interested enough to give it, see the whole thing through, they can transfer it to the full game and they get it. And I think
mean,
I
chapter
really
3, that's a decent chunk of
that's
the
a
game.
yeah,
It's like,
yeah.
yeah.
So they're really hoping that like this will give it the boost that it needs, because Fuga getting a sequel, when we talked about it back then, it's like that's very surprising, because they were very honest and upfront saying that Fuga didn't really sell all that well, but we still believe in it, and that's really fantastic that they still believe in the strength of the IP and still believe that like there's a pathway to success, and hopefully it finds it.
Also, I find it pretty cool that I was the first person to say, "Oh, Fuga runs on Steam Deck," and it's now Steam Deck verified.
There you go, the Fuga champion. But yeah, I mean that's all that we can really say about it for right now, because they'll share more about it at that upcoming broadcast in July
2
20th.
weeks.
28th.
Yeah. So we won't. It'll be 2 podcasts from now where we'll be able to see whether we have a release window, platforms, new artwork, anything like that.
I'm kind of interested to see like what kind of like before they say anything about it, like what would you like to see in this sequel, James?
I honestly don't know, because I feel like one of the things I really enjoyed about the first game was that it felt like that everything that was in there kind of had a reason to be there. It didn't really have anything that I'd say stood out as being super half-baked for the type of game it was,
I think there should be situations where you really, really have to like think hard about using the soul cannon and like really consider it. I would like to see like a tougher decisions, because there are definitely like some pairings in the first Fuga that are kind of like the quote unquote instant win pair. Like that, like it was kind of like you'd be crazy not to pair these two together, because the gameplay bonuses that you got out of them just really outshine whoever else they.
It's
might be
basically
paired
like a
with.
balance pass
Yeah,
is something you'd like. Yeah.
I think the problem is though is that I understand what you're saying, but I don't think the soul cannon is a way of going about it, because spoiler alert, kind of, but I think anyone that was getting into this game kind of realized that was going to be the case in the first place.
but
You
there's so
can't get
many.
you
There's so
can't get the true ending in the first game if you use the soul cannon. I can only assume it's
exactly.
going to be the same thing here. So it's
That's why they should like I don't think they should like lock a true ending be behind like the soul cannon mechanic. I think that like you should really be like think hard
what you
about
really
whether to
so,
use it, because
so what you're really saying
they
is
basically made like the soul cannon mechanic and like incentivized them to never use it, and like that's kind of weird, because now you're just like incentivized to do a pacifist run, and like that's fine and all, but like it kind of like they made a mechanic and it says don't use it. It's like, okay, well I don't have to really use it then. I never have to consider about it unless I want to see like the bad ending.
It does kind of feel so. I have not played this, so maybe I should keep my mouth shut, but I'm not going to because I'm dumb. But it seems like to me, if you use the soul cannon, it's like, oh, you messed up. You still have an out, but you're not. You're locked out of the best ending now. Better to reload your save or something.
Yeah.
And that feels mechanical and kind of like, okay, I guess. Sure.
Yeah, and honestly, so forgive me if I'm reading into things, but it sounds more like you want the next game to be more difficult.
I would like I would like to see like more situations like I would expect like enhancements and like a direction where like you really have to think hard about like maybe I really have to use the soul cannon if they're still gonna like have it as a central plot point. Like I don't think there should be a thing where like, hey, if you use the soul cannon, there should be like a different like. I don't know. I just think it's weird that like you unlock to get the best ending, you don't have to use the soul cannon. And that makes sense thematically, and I understand it. But it's just like, but you get a zero sum situation of like, okay, then I never have to think about not using the soul cannon ever. because it's like I would never want to use it because I want to get the true ending, and most people will just want to do a one and done playthrough of this. It's like, okay, got the best ending, and
I think you're kind of missing the point of Soul Cannon, though. It's not there to be used. It's there as a threat of if you don't.
But that's a gameplay mechanic. That is a gameplay mechanic that, like, yes, you can use it. You cannot tell me that, like, it's not there to be used. It's like it very much is there as an option to be used.
Yes, in the sense that you can use it, but it's very clear that the game doesn't want you to use it.
Yeah, obviously, like I said, it is very thematic of like why they would lock out the true ending for that. I just think that, like, if you're gonna have that, you should make situations that like should really make you think about to use it. There was never a situation in Fuga where you're like, oh my gosh.
This is probably oversimplifying, but I'm imagining a situation where you have to use the Soul Cannon at least once at this point right here. And then you have to make a choice on how to use it, and it might shift the ending, but you don't base a true ending on who you pick.
You know what? Actually, I think you might be onto something. I think there might be something interesting where it's like you have to use the Soul Cannon at one point, and part of the problem is like figuring out, okay, who do you sacrifice, and whether or not they have it so that you have to choose the right kid or whatnot at a specific time. It's like I don't know if you've seen the sort of teaser they had if you got all the gears, Josh, but it does seem like Fuga 2, at least when they were thinking about it last year, was always going to be a darker game.
I mean, that's totally like fine. You know, that's totally okay. I just think that like they have a really great concept on the first game. It's like the first game is like almost like a.
I also think it's fair that if you're making a sequel and it's very clearly meant for people that have already played the first game, I think it's perfectly reasonable to make the follow-up a harder game, because it's like if you've played the first one, it just makes sense that it would be like, well, we're going to ramp up the difficulty a bit.
I guess that feeds into like my balance thing of like you can definitely just find like the quote unquote winning duos in Fuga and steamroll through it, and I think if it like and that kind of like I don't know takes something out of the game for me of like you can avoid those, but like the options they gave you the option, you'd be foolish not to do it in a way. Also, that's
a very silly baseline question, kind of yes or no. Does the first game leave like an opening for a narrative sequel?
I don't know how they're going to frame the sequel, because at least with the true ending, it's very explicitly everything solved, happy ending. So I think the way that they're going to handle it with Fuga 2 is it's going to be more of a what if scenario or something.
That'd be interesting to see, like, if it's just a standalone story, or if it's more of a different like narrative outcome.
Yeah, and I can totally see where they might branch it. And I'm very interested to see what happens, because like I think Fuga's story is fine, but I think compared to something like Solo to Robo, the story isn't.
It's very like it's grim, and it's a very grim premise, but it's played very straightforwardly to a fault.
And it's like it's funny because I remember when Fuga came out, the one thing I said was that before Fuga, I'd say that the main reason to play a CyberConnect 2 game is for the story. Like you look at Dot Hack and it's like, let's be real here. The main reason you're playing that is for the story. If you look at Solo to Robo, the gameplay's fine, but the story is definitely the story, the world building, the aesthetics, the music. That's all stuff that CyberConnect 2 has been great at. That's also why I should really try and check out their other like multimedia stuff. I think they're working on an anime soon or something. I don't know. But it's like, I mean, it makes sense for them because they obviously have that sort of chops. I mean, I know Naruto fans that tell me that if you want to like get caught up on Naruto, that playing through the Ninja Storm games is perfectly acceptable because the way the story's delivered in them is actually pretty damn good, which is like wild. But But Fuga, the story's fine. and all of that, but it's the first time where I'd say that for a Cyber Connect 2 game, it's not what you come into it for, because for the first time, the gameplay is like far and away the best part of the game.
Yeah, you're definitely getting it for like the kind of the atmosphere and the gameplay that occupies that atmosphere in it.
Yeah.
It's a very unique in its own way through that. And I also hope that like they find a way to kind of vary it up, like the progression, because the like once you see the progression once or twice in Fuga, that's how it remains throughout the game. It's like this is the gameplay loop. And
Yeah.
I hope they find ways to kind of throw a wrench into there.
Yeah, I'm
So,
very interested to see what the sequel is going to look like, because, well, first, for one thing, I mean, this is the first time we're getting a sequel to a Little Tail Bronx game in a timely manner, and not over a decade after the last one came out.
mhm.
So it's going to be like everything's fresh in mind, and this is a development team that obviously like nailed it on their first go around with Fuga 1, and it's like, I mean, the crazy thing is that the director for Fuga, I think it was his first time directing a game.
Huh.
And it's like, he did a great job. And it's like, man, I'm really curious to see what he manages to deliver, what the team as a whole manages to deliver with some experience under their belt. It's like, it's just really cool. And it's like, I can't wait to see what they have.
Yeah,
in store.
and sequel has a lot of potential. There are definitely be keeping a close eye on what they share in the coming weeks.
Plus, it just feels good to like keep an eye out for the underdog. Haha.
Yeah, yeah, Fuga definitely a big underdog.
We did have another game announcement this week, and Josh is the one that put up this news post on our site, and that is Mato Anomalies. I hope I'm pronouncing this correct. This is a new title from publisher Prime Matter, working with developer Arrowiz, and it is described as an anime-inspired turn-based RPG with a high focus on like investigation, and involves dual protagonists, Doe and Graham, where Doe is an investigator and Graham is an exorcist. So a very kind of interesting premise. We have a trailer for this, and it kind of shows both how the two characters, one of them is more about like gathering information, progressing the story, investigating the area, and then the other one is your primary character in combat. It takes place in a city, old Shanghai. Let's see, neo-futuristic like version of old Shanghai. So it's like cyberpunk, but also like supernatural.
Yeah.
It's a lot of interesting, like an interesting blend of a lot of cool ideas that I don't think has been, I can't quite say like, oh, this game looks like X other game to like really compare it to like paint the picture in your mind. So I look at the trailer here. I suggest people go watch the trailer for Mato Anomalies, because it's quite distinct looking, and it's scheduled to be released at some point next year. So just basically kind of putting it on the calendar for something to look forward to in 2023. I guess we're at the time of year where we're starting to kind of dot out what we can start looking forward to for the next calendar year, ahead of all the stuff that we're already trying to finish for this one.
Yeah, and this is coming out to basically all platforms: PlayStation platforms, Xbox platforms, Switch, and PC. Yeah, it's kind of a really, really cool premise that they present here, because like you said, like there's like two distinct play styles here, with Doe like really focusing and doubling down on like your typical like detective investigation side of like, you talk to NPCs around gathering intel, and like the intel that you gather through Doe like opens up like rifts as sort of like mini dungeons for Graham to like pursue like the intel that they give you. So you have like Graham who has like, it's like a katana wielding exorcist, and then like along the way you'll like find like party members that will join up with them, like, and like they kind of tease that like there'll be like some uneasy alliances, like sometimes like the party members that you recruit will not be like on the best terms with you, maybe kind of like the enemy of my enemy is my friend sort of deal. And like the party members like that you like field out in battle, like they haven't really gone into like the specifics of like how the battle system will play out. We know that it's turn based, but we don't know exactly what your options are. But they did share that like all your party members will be sharing like a universal like health bar in battle. So no one like there's like no individual health bars for your party members in battle, and they kind of show on the Steam page some of like the upgrades and progression systems that they'll have as well.
And then the thing about this announcement trailer that's kind of interesting is that it shows a lot of gameplay, but in a manner where you don't like, it has no UI. So it's described as a turn-based game, and you can see like cutscenes and animations that are clearly from like the battle system, but in a cinematic way, because maybe they don't have the UI quite squared away yet, or they just want to kind of give the flavor for what the game might play like. So I don't know. I think it's kind of a good compromise between just like a CG introducing the concept trailer, but how does this game actually play? Well, you can kind of glean it from because what they're showing is ostensibly gameplay, just in a presented in kind of an introductory format. And then the press release talks about how it not only are the two protagonists, but there's kind of like a duality of the world, because you've got the old Shanghai, but then also like the demon rifts that you kind of investigate the anomalies from and things like that. So you can kind of see glimpses of all of those mechanics in it's a good introductory trailer is basically what I'm getting at. I wish more games kind of introduce their games like this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely keep it in the back of your mind, like, as we enter the new year and stuff. So yeah, that was a pretty cool announcement out of nowhere this week.
Yep, slated for 2023. It's we got a bunch of screenshots in the trailer up on the site. And does it have? Yeah, it already has a Steam page, like you mentioned. So can get a lot of the details there about the publisher and the developer. Arrowiz, the developer, like I had heard of the developer, but I wasn't familiar with them. I guess they've made like some VR games and some other like story-based like visual novel type games. But this is the first one that they've made that is an RPG in any fashion. So it's always kind of interesting to see some developer enter that space. We also got some new footage about the highly anticipated 2022 RPG Star Ocean: The Divine Force. So I don't know if so I don't think we had any news in the last 3 weeks that you guys talked about for this game, other than maybe the release date. I'm trying to remember when the release date was announced, if that was before I stepped out or not.
That was like at the very end of June, like on June 29. Yeah, so I don't know if you were here for that or not, but like that was like the last big, like, a big news drop of like when we finally get to play this game this year. Yeah, they introduced some new characters and then new key visual during that time, and like they're
we had the English release date, we had the release date trailer in both English and Japanese in late June.
So yeah, they started actually like giving us like detailed like info on the gameplay of like, hey, this is how the battle system works. This is and then they kind of teased on like the next info drop. They'll show more about like how you explore the world. So that was kind of the last time we heard about this game, which is not very recently. Then they showed off. They're starting to gear up the marketing campaign for Star Ocean: The Divine Force with like character trailers. So.
Yeah, and that's the news for this week. So we got the first two character trailers for the two protagonists, Raymond Lawrence and Laeticia Aucerius. Raymond Lawrence and Laeticia Aucerius. So this is the main two characters of the game, and these trailers are pretty short. They're like 50 seconds each. Oh, that's interesting. The English Raymond Lawrence trailer is shorter than the Japanese one. Huh. I assumed it was the same trailer.
Is it? There might be just some different like
merch. Oh yeah, the Japanese one just has more like merch.
Like here's the collector's edition
cards at the end.
Yeah.
So, anyways, these trailers are pretty short, and usually it's just the character's voice actor or actress speaking over some cutscenes involving them. So when I watch these, I'm gonna be blunt. When I watch these trailers, it almost feels like a fan dub. I don't know. Like I guess the voice acting is like the quality of the audio of the voice acting in English is fine, but it feels like it's almost like doesn't belong to the footage, because there's no lip sync, and it's like even the lip flaps are like poorly implemented, and then on top of that, the animation of the character models themselves is kind of stiff. It was almost distracting. Like I had to like watch this trailer once just to like get that out of my system. Like, okay, let me watch it again and actually pay attention to what they're saying, because they're short trailers, so it's fine. But Adam, I think you wrote a couple months ago like what you would like to see out of Star Ocean: The Divine Force, and one of the things you put on there was improve the quality of the model animations. Well, how are you feeling after you saw these two character trailers?
So far, not so good.
and I don't want to be like there's more important things to video games rather than the quality of the model animations, but it's just like, oh, this looks like a Star Ocean game, so I guess I know what we're getting into. And then just the
CMC got baby face.
Yeah, his 2D art is a lot better than his 3D model in general.
That is
They have
that is a story of All Star Ocean games.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I just hope this is like a fun game to play and like a fun goofy time. Honestly, I mean, that's all I can really hope for out of a Star Ocean game at this point. Because like, let's all be honest and be like, yeah, like the especially the facial animations in these character creators is like sort of stiff. It's not like amazing, but it's workable, serviceable.
Yeah, and I will say that Laeticia's is a bit better. Laeticia's just reminds me like of maybe a late gen PS3 game. It's taken me longer to warm up to Raymond. Like just something about his character design, model, voice altogether, and I'm just not feeling. Laeticia is it Laeticia? Yeah, Laeticia
Yeah.
is I think a little bit more
I always have
better
to double check
realized.
my spelling of Laeticia's name because I will I feel like I will always like switch the two vowels of A and
Hmm.
E at the very start of it when I write out her name. I'm like, okay, it's Lae and then Ticia, and then it's every single time I type it, I'm like, okay, I have to remember that it's spelled like this.
But yeah, that's so I'm guessing we're going to get all the other trailers in the coming months as the marketing ramps up for the October release for the basically the cast that was introduced in late June with Nina and Midas, and were there a couple others?
Yeah,
I
there's
guess
like two other characters that they
that were
announced
announced
alongside.
earlier. Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember the girl that has like the yellow zip up, and then the other dude that's like a nerd. I don't remember his name. I need to catch up
That's a
on my.
nerd. Dang. All right.
I need to remind myself who these characters are,
Mhm.
because it felt like this game was announced a while ago, and then it went dark for a good while, and now we're kind of like, oh yeah, let me remind myself of all the things they've revealed for Divine Force. But yeah, October 27th is the release date. We're going to be going through the character trailers. I'm assuming weekly or bi-weekly up until then.
Keep an eye out whether the facial animations are going to be improved gradually as the more character trailers come out.
Maybe it'll just be that Raymond is awful and the rest are fine.
No, I want to believe in Raymond.
Okay, me too.
Facial animation watch. That's what it is.
And then I mentioned this in passing, but in addition to Live Alive, one of the other things that is coming out next week that we might be able to talk about if people make time for it for the next podcast is the first DLC to Stranger of Paradise Final Fantasy Origin. So Trials of the Dragon King is coming out, I believe, on the 20th, so next Wednesday. And Square Enix has revealed some of the classes that they're adding for this expansion: the Pilgrim, the Evoker, and the Summoner, alongside the addition of the Stave weapon type. Unfortunately, I've not played Stranger of Paradise yet, so I can't really talk about like what these might feel like. I don't know if you guys who have played Stranger of Paradise, if there's anything specific about the Trials of the Dragon King that you're most excited for, or if more of the same is kind of all you're hoping for.
I'm excited. I'm glad that they're at, like I thought it was gonna be just like one new job per like expansion or something, or like but to see that's like it's like a new weapon type and staves, and that adding staves unlocks 3 new jobs with Pilgrim, Evoker, and Summoner, and like all the footage, like it's a brief clips, but like it's just more options, more things to like mess around with, more things to level up and see what the skill trees are for these new jobs. It's cool, it's awesome. It's a fun game to play and just get your hands on. So I'm stoked that like I didn't know that they were gonna add like 3 new jobs to this out of nowhere, and they also just recently announced like in an upcoming update for Stranger of Paradise that like, hey, for some reason, if you don't want to play Jack, you can go play all his other play his other party members as well, like in single player, not just be confined to Jack.
Now,
Um,
do you have control over like their gear to the same extent that you do Jack? How does
yeah,
that
I mean,
work?
I assume so because I don't exactly know how they're gonna do it like through single player, but like when you join a multiplayer session, you take control as one of his friends, and with like your just current gear setup. Now for single player, it gets kind of weird because like when you're configuring them, um, they're like confined to like certain classes only and certain jobs, and so like that's kind of where it gets weird. So I don't know exactly how they're just gonna if they're just gonna let you like blow like the restrictions, like you don't have restrictions anymore, and you're just like kind of they let you be any job, any class with the when you take control of them. I don't know exactly how they're going to implement that because it's different implementations of like depending on like how you configure them for single player versus like kind of like possessing them with your own gear and abilities and jobs in like a multiplayer session.
So they have
yeah.
detailed like just the numbers behind the expansion. Some people might get a kick out of this, like 4 new main missions, 9 new side missions. When I'm thinking like, what does that mean? Is if I compare this to like, Adam, I know you played both games. If I compare this to like Neo missions, is that sort of the same scope that I'm looking at?
Yeah.
Yeah, can they say
So-
2 new boss battles, which is about what the Neo DLCs added as well. So it seems like a kind of very typical kind of size for the package here. Have they announced the number of DLCs? Was it 3, or is that just
3.
what people are guessing?
3.
They
Well,
haven't
they've announced 3.
Yeah, they detailed it like right before it released. It's like it was 3. It was like Trials of the Dragon King. Then after this, it'll be Wanderer of the Rift, and then Different Future. I think I want to say. Yeah. So, I hope that they just continue adding more jobs and classes like in each expansion. That'd be great because they're just like some really deep cuts like Evoker here. Like someone mentioned in our Twitter comments. Like I don't know if they introduced Evoker ever since like FF3 in a Final Fantasy game.
I didn't realize that was an existing class.
Yeah,
Mhm.
and then like Pilgrim, I don't recall off the top of my head when was the last time you saw Pilgrim in a Final Fantasy game.
Here, I'll type Final Fantasy Pilgrim. What do I get? Nothing. Oh wait, I guess there's a Final Fantasy 14 term for Pilgrim. I don't know what this
I don't
is.
know.
Oh,
Yeah.
never mind. That's just a free company name. All right, Final
Okay.
Fantasy Pilgrim
There you go.
doesn't give me much of anything. So maybe that's a Stranger of
Maybe it's an
Paradise
album.
original.
There you go.
And so now my final question is anyone going to play this when it comes out, or is it more at a point where too much is coming out, you'll wait for the rest of the DLC and maybe play it all at once?
I'll probably play it. I'll probably play it.
I want to play it when it comes out, but also I want to play Live Alive.
That's true.
Yep.
Yeah. So we'll see. I mean, I have a end game save of Stranger of Paradise that I just haven't booted up. Like I have unlocked the chaos difficulty. I've played a little bit of the chaos difficulty, but
Well, now you get the Bahamut difficulty.
yeah, I know there's the new Bahamut. I really hope that the new Bahamut difficulty doesn't have like the weird leveling up mechanic that the chaos difficulty has, where like when you unlock chaos difficulty in Stranger of Paradise, it like every single stage has a new chaos difficulty, but like if you want like better like rewards out of them, you have to like level up the stages. And I think that's kind of a similar way that Neo did it. I can't remember off the top of my head how Neo did it, but there's like a certain point where you have to like level up end game stages to like get better loot and rewards out of them.
Neo was more just like a world state, so it wasn't mission by mission.
Okay, yeah, this one is mission by mission, and like you have to level them up using like these anima shards that like you have to like grind to get them, and like some of like and to get like as you level them up, like the more anima shards you'll need to like feed into the stages. So it's like it did provide like a repetitive gameplay loop that like you're kind of getting like something out of them, but it was very repetitive and dull to just kind of grind them up. So hopefully Bahamut difficulty kind of gets rid of that and like just has like a baseline. Hey, these are super tough and you got to be geared out to tackle them, but hopefully there's like a good incentive to tackle them and like the difficulty like of them is worth it.
The next piece of news is for the upcoming game SD Gundam G Generation ETERNAL. This was announced back in May as a... I need to hand this off to Josh. Is the series of games called G Generation? Is that like that's the series?
Yeah, that's a series named G Generations. You have like G Generation Wars, G Generation Overworld, like on the PSP.
So the upcoming game is G Generation ETERNAL. It is a mobile game that doesn't have a release date, but has an announced closed beta. As they kind of reveal more information about this game, they've kicked off a new series of blogs called Eternal Transmission, and Volume 1 released in the last week, which revealed a key visual for the game and just some more information. So, Josh, is there anything from this first kind of news blip from G Generation ETERNAL that you think is worth highlighting here?
Yeah, there's like a lot of interesting stuff. Obviously, a lot of people's worries is because this is a mobile game. There will definitely be a gacha system, and like yes, they did announce that this like the like blog development blog of like how the gacha system will work in this game because it's a really interesting problem to tackle because of how G Generation works. And in the G Generation series, typically it's sort of like Pokemon style, where you get like a Zaku, for example, and like you salvage a Zaku, so it joins your ranks.
To
And like
interrupt you just briefly, sorry. Is this the
Yeah.
first G Generation game that is a mobile game?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, just want to make sure on that. Okay.
Yeah, so like when you get like a capture a Zaku, for example, in one of the G Generation games, you level it up, and like as you level it up, you can kind of sort of like branch out its evolution Pokemon style, where like at level 3 you can turn it into like a high mobility Zaku, and maybe at level 5 maybe you could turn it into like a Zigok, or like at level 7 you can turn it into like like Stars Zaku, and at level 10 maybe you can like level it up to like some crazy unit because you took the time to level it up all the way to max level, and now you can either like you have like these 4 branching options, and like well, depending on what evolution you take with that, let's say you turn it into a Sharzaku, then like that process repeats itself where like it has higher base stats and like a new move arsenal as the Sharzaku, but like at different like level points you can further develop it into like new units. So that was like kind of like the interesting and fun part about the G Generation games, because it's kind of like a whole like sort of Pokemon gameplay loop of like you're leveling it and it has different evolutions. And how would that play out in a mobile game that has a gacha system? So the developers of G Generation Eternal have said that you could there's still that option in the game, that's still that gameplay loop where you can obtain units and level them up into other ones, but the gacha system in the game they've detailed will allow you to get the following. You'll get early access to units, say, so that implies that like, hey, let's say they introduced like the unicorn Gundam, uh like maybe like a future event or a future content update. Maybe there'll be a unicorn Gundam banner, and like, hey, you can roll for that unicorn Gundam, and when you roll for it, you'll get early access to that unicorn Gundam, or you can wait till a later time and they'll like you can upgrade a unit to become the unicorn Gundam instead. And when you gacha for this unicorn Gundam, they'll be already upgraded to high grade. But so like if you were to roll for it instead, it'll be more powerful when you obtain it. But if you wait for it and like upgrade to the unicorn Gundam organically through the game itself, you can just like you can build it up and then turn it into a high grade through like normal progression instead. So you're just basically getting like a like you can just like obtain it in a more powerful state when you gacha for it, or you can wait till like it comes to the game and you upgrade to it, and then once you continually upgrade the unicorn Gundam that you obtain through the in game, you can basically use like in game mats to get it to high grade. So like you're taking more time, but you didn't have to gacha for it. And then the only thing that you're getting exclusively through like the gacha version of a unit is like this how they phrase a chance to get units with the eternal arms depending on the unit, and the eternal arms are basically special unique battle animations for like a certain attack, which is weird. So like if you're willing to take the time and effort to like get the unit normally, the only thing you're really missing out with the gacha version is like a unique battle animation, because they actually spelled out in the developer blog itself, like with the upgrade system, like your when you fully upgrade, let's say the unicorn Gundam, like max level, max rarity, max whatever, it'll have identical stats to like a unicorn Gundam that you got through the gacha if you to max level that out. The only difference, I based on their the way they word it, the only difference between like a unicorn Gundam that you obtain normally in game and a unicorn Gundam that you obtain to the gacha, ideally, is that the gacha version just has this eternal arms. This is a unique battle animation,
which is entirely cosmetic.
Yeah,
that's kind of interesting,
So-
because it's kind of like when a game doesn't have a gacha system but might have microtransactions. The main thing is well, those microtransactions better be either only for convenience or cosmetic. And then this is kind of like both those things implemented into a gacha gotcha sort of system where uh, outside of that system, you're giving up the cosmetic of the animation on this attack, and you might just take more time to get your unit in the same place mechanically, but that's just convenience and cosmetic.
Yeah, so
It's
like
kind of an
it
interesting
feels like
little approach to that.
yeah, the development team is keenly aware of like riding this fine line, and I think there's like the really cool thing that I've liked out of these like Gundam games in general is like these development blogs because it kind of gets you like a sneak peek behind like the mindset behind like the creators of the game. Like they've been doing development blogs for Gundam Evolution, which is like the Gundam Overwatch clone that they've been doing, and like they've gotten really in depth of like where they're at during development and what sort of features they're thinking about and testing and tinkering with. So I hope to see more development blogs come out for this game, sort of like how they've done with Gundam Evolution, because I think this is a really, really valuable thing that they're addressing from the forefront. And like they know that like what the gameplay is in G Generation, what fans like. So they're really trying to be careful of like not alienating that audience, because like they know that like they've already alienated a good chunk of their audience by saying, "Hey, this is a mobile game, and this will also have a gacha game." It's like, well, how is that going to work with like how we G Generation systems? And they also said that because this game will have a lot of units and a lot of battle animations, they know that it will bloat the file size. So there's actually like they've called it like a half mode and like a full mode to these battle animations, where like the half mode will be like a lighter, more quicker battle animation to like reduce file size, and they'll offer that as well. But they haven't really they know that like the closed beta is still gonna come. They haven't really dated that yet, so I'm really interested, like how this will all shake out. I really, really want to give this game a go and like see like, hey, can a person play this game and not touch the gacha system at all and be successful? Because the way that they're saying it is like they it seems like that, like, yes, like you can go into this game and like give it enough time and effort, like you can get through this without ever having to touch the gacha system.
It kind of depends on the extent of the inconvenience.
Yeah, exactly.
On whether or not it's actually true. Like, yes, you can enjoy this game without it, or if it's only technically true. Or like, yes, but it takes 5 times as long, or whatever.
Yeah, pretty much. And like they also said that it will have a stamina system, but they've made it so like the stamina isn't required to get through like the main scenario stages, and stamina is going to be like for maybe like special event stages, which is sort of like how Dissidia Opera Omnia does it for the Final Fantasy, and people seem to really like the way it handles it there.
To me, this still feels like too many footnotes. Like,
Yeah,
a little bit. Like each one you can kind of argue around, but when you pile it up, I still see it as like, no thanks. Where it's like, you don't. They're equally as strong, but they it takes longer to get them there. Oh, and their animations aren't the same ones. And there is also stamina, but it's not for the main quest. It just seems like caveat. Where it's like they're trying to have their cake and eat it too. Where it's like, we want to benefit from having a gacha system and having people who are invested and get into that, but also we want to make sure that we have enough like language that says no, it's fine, you can play for free. I'm just at that point, I'm just kind of like, everything you're saying is good.
It is kind of crazy too, because their ambition with this game is like crazy too, because they said that they're aiming to have over 700 units available on release for this game. It's like, how, like, what kind of file size are we talking about here? If there's gonna be
when you said
over 700 units and there'll be battle animations. Like,
when you said the animations were cut short specifically in the service of reducing file size, I thought that was interesting, because like for me it'd just be like, well, some people just might want to have the shorter animations because they've seen them enough times or whatever. But no, specifically we were having this option for file size because people's phones, some of them only have 8 gigs still potentially, or 16 gigs.
So it's a really, really, I'm really interested to see how this shakes out, because a lot of it is like, I am in this like weird space of like, I know how the G Generation games work inside and out. I know how they play, and like what are the defining systems that like make this series up. And I also am very keenly aware of like how gacha mobile game bullshit works, because I played a good chunk of them. So I'm interested to see like how they try to marry them together in a maybe harmonious manner. And so this is one of those things, like, I know both of these two spheres very well, and to see how they come together, who knows? And
You are
that makes
uniquely
me-
qualified.
Yeah, I am very intensely curious of like how this how this will shape up. Huh. Yeah, that was
Yeah, so there's no dates on the closed beta or the release. So at this point, it's just kind of, have they dated like the next transmission even, or is it just kind of?
these come out of nowhere. These kind of just pop up. It's like, okay, this is the next thing.
All right, so we'll let you know whenever the next thing pops up.
Yeah. I do hope that like they continue to do this like line of communication. Like I thought it was really cool with like the Gundam Evolution when they had like the console closed beta for that game. Like they really went deep on like, hey, these are the aim assist options, and they like provided like clips on like, hey, if you toggle this aim assist option like to this slider, like how well it'll like implement it. And like they had like side by side comparison of like, hey, if you put the slider all the way to this way, this is how the aim assist works, and if you put it all the way this way, this is how the aim assist influences it side by side. And it's like, wow, that's really that's really cool that like you went out of your way to like actually show people a side by side comparison of like how this specific setting influences that. And like I hope they do a similar sort of thing here where like if there's like an option or like a sort of feature that like you should show it side by side and show people that level of transparency as well.
No, I wish more games did that with like their graphic options or toggle options or things like that.
Yeah.
The last 3 bits of news are just release dates or port dates. We'll just run through these. Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance 2, it's not a remaster, just the port to modern consoles and PC, will be releasing on July 20th. I don't know if anyone has expressed interest in covering this, but it's kind of always cool to have these games carried forward on modern consoles just for legacy's sake.
Hitting right on the exact same date as the Stranger of Paradise DLC. Uh-oh.
I forget, did Scott cover Dark Alliance 1 port, or did we not cover that?
We
This
didn't
is a
review
port.
it.
Yeah, because I mean, I don't want to say like, oh, it's just a port. It's always cool to have these games on PC so that, modders or whoever can kind of keep them in, a playable state and make them available and not just locked away on their initial consoles. So yeah, Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance 2 on July 20th for modern consoles and PC. Also coming to console on September 29th is Pathfinder Wrath of the Righteous. It will be PlayStation 4, Xbox One, and Switch. The Switch version will be a cloud version of the game. And in addition to this, the third DLC for Pathfinder Wrath of the Righteous will be on August 11th for the PC version. It's similar to as in Kingmaker, the third DLC is kind of a standalone game mode that is described as roguelike, but will also have a portion of the main game assigned to it as well.
Yeah, I want to pick your brain about this because like I don't know much about the Pathfinder games, but yeah, you do. So like is there anything that really stands out to you like in terms of this upcoming third DLC? And also like the upcoming console releases when they hit, it'll also be like when the enhanced edition of Wrath of the Righteous will be coming out. And from what I understand, like Kingmaker's enhanced edition like really overhauled a good chunk of that game.
Well, the thing about Kingmaker is that I feel like it had more room for overhaul because they post added like the turn-based mode and the console controls and all that, where that's already all in place for Wrath of the Righteous. So I don't know that the Wrath of the Righteous Enhanced Edition has as much like headroom because it's already been like tested in with Kingmaker. As for the DLCs themselves, I did replay through Kingmaker once all the DLCs came out. One of them was like a very typical RPG DLC where it's like in a 100-hour RPG, it was like a 3 or 4 hour chapter, which was fine and good, but just a very small component of the game. Just kind of like pay an extra $10 to get a little extra content. One of the Kingmaker DLCs was like a prequel where you would play that and then you would like save the state of how you ended it, and then it would affect your main game. And then the third part of the Kingmaker DLC was very similar to what's being described here for Wrath of the Righteous, where it was like a standalone game mode that also played a role in the main game. That was, I don't remember if it was exactly roguelike or if it was procedural, but it was similar in nature, where we're supposed to be kind of like, if you don't want to play through this story, you can play through this mode that's more just divorced from the narrative, and you can just kind of have fun with your builds or things like that. I think I enjoyed Wrath of the Righteous just slightly less than Kingmaker. I forget what I scored the two games, to be honest. I know I scored them both not as high as I wanted, or as I initially would have liked, because they had some clear things that I just didn't enjoy. For Wrath of the Righteous, it's basically the Crusade mode. I didn't gel with at all. It's part of those things where it's like, yeah, I do kind of want to play the DLCs to experience them, but the game is also 100 hours long, so that sort of thing. So it's like, do I? Yeah, and it's the sort of thing where I haven't played it since last year, so I could pick up my old file and be like, all right, what was my build again? Where was I at? How do I access?
This standalone? You can just make a new party from the ground up. And
yeah, that's true. But it's always cool to have these games on console. I know some people really like. I greatly prefer the real time with pause rather than the turn based. There's actually, I remember talking about this before already on the podcast, but I'll say it again because it still sticks in my craw. There's like one section of Wrath of the Righteous as part of a gimmick that you have to play in the turn based mode, because you're supposed to be like, you're in the realm of like some master tactician. So it's like, you're stuck on turn based mode now. And it was such a pain and slog. I'm like, God, this is terrible. People play through the whole game like this. It was awful. And that's just my opinion. If you enjoy turn-based mode on these games, that's fine. So I probably won't play through the DLC of Wrath of the Righteous unless someone really tells me that it's quite damn good. I am interested.
Like, do you think it would be a pain to play this game like through a cloud version? Like, do you really need like, do you think that would like fuck people up? Like saying, oh, like the instability or like all the
I guess my answer would be is in turn-based mode, you're probably fine, but I just gave you my opinion on turn-based mode.
Yeah, but I feel like
if your plan for Pathfinder Wrath of the Righteous was to play through it in turn-based mode on Switch through the cloud, I hope you have like 200 hours handy. And also, I'm just wondering, like, just that smaller screen, if that would be a pain. Because like it's an isometric game and there's lots of you have party of, I think, is it 5 or 6? It's either 5 or 6 characters. I just feel like that would be like, it'd almost be like draining on your eyes after a while. I guess I'm thinking about it in portable mode. Of course, you could put it on the TV, I suppose. Yeah, I always think of playing the Switch in portable mode, but yeah, I guess play it on big screen, and that last part doesn't.
I would assume that like if people who pick this up on Switch are targeting to play this on portable mode, because if like unless that's like their primary console, they have other avenues to play this on like a bigger screen than, so that's what I assume as well. It's like, hey, if you're gonna pick this on Switch, you're probably either gonna play this in portable and you don't plan to get a Steam Deck.
I guess I'll just say playing this on portable on Switch through a cloud through turn-based mode doesn't sound like my cup of tea. I'll put it like that. And the last release date announcement is that Yomawari Lost in the Dark will be releasing on October 25th in North America, October 28th in Europe. We talked about it, I think, in like April or May. That's been released in Japan. We will get it here in the States this fall.
Yeah, just more putting some date to it.
Yeah, they want to release it in time for Halloween, and good on them for not releasing it on Halloween, because it's a little bit of a pet peeve. But whenever a horror game releases on Halloween, it's like, well, most people aren't going to play it on Halloween.
By the time you're playing it, it's November 1st, 2nd, 3rd. Yeah,
and it's just like playing it a few days before Halloween. You still get the vibes. The vibes. But as soon as it's November, it's like, no, I don't care about candy anymore. I want turkey.
That's true.
It's like that old meme, or it's like October 31st versus November 1st. It's like, I'm in Christmas mode. Damn it.
Yeah,
exactly.
I don't want kids to disturb their gameplay time. Okay.
I think horror game devs and publishers have like gotten better at like releasing in October, but not on Halloween. It's like
it's always kind of fun like when a horror movie like releases in January, and it's like, wait, what?
Oh no, yeah, you have clearly fucked up then, and you didn't plan this out well.
Well, Final Fantasy 14 had that. You get the Halloween costumes in, was it February or something like that, because of all the delays.
That's kind of interesting. They're like, oh, well, we don't want to wait for a year, so here, have them now. You played the other Yomawari games, right, Chow? Or am I thinking of someone else?
Yeah, I only played the first one. I haven't played the second one. I recommend playing the intro. It'll leave you kind of traumatized.
Yeah, I don't know. Spook. Too spook.
You said you recommend playing the intro. I thought, like, as opposed to what? Oh, as opposed to not playing it.
No, I recommend playing it. You can watch the intro, but as a...
Chow just watching it on YouTube again.
No, I actually beat this game. I have it on the Vita. Okay.
I don't know. Now I need the receipts, Chow. Can you prove to me that you've beaten this instead of just watching someone?
I have the platinum trophy.
Okay, well, you can. Someone could have gotten it for you.
Ooh.
No, I believe you, Joe.
But no,
Alright.
it's a pretty short game. I recommend giving it a try. It's very charming, but it does have a very traumatic introduction at the beginning. So
Do you plan to play the second Yomawari game anytime soon?
not really.
Okay, well, no, Saga.
Fair enough. And that covers it. Covers us for this episode of the Tetracast. So it's good to be back. We ended up having 2 hours of stuff to talk about. Surprise, surprise. Lots to talk about coming up. We've already gone through the whole list. So I won't go it again. But exciting times ahead for fans of several different franchises and games.
I was gonna say I forgot to. Sorry to cut you off, Brian. But
No,
have
no
we
problem.
gone over the Sega Mini, the Sega Genesis Mini 2 coming to North America?
Oh yeah, that is coming to North America. They did give that a date. We only previously discussed that like during its announcement and like the initial wave of games, but we didn't know if it was coming to America. That was dated day and date with its launch in Japan on October 27th. It's going to be exclusively sold via Amazon for, I guess, $103 and like around like right now it's saying $102.38 when I accessed it, but man,
Pretty steep, but you know what? I might get it. It has Lunar.
yeah, they announced another wave of games for it. So they announced that for cartridge titles they have Harimanada. I don't know what the fuck that is, Chow. I'm sorry. Alien Soldier, Fatal Fury 2, damn good ass game. A Mahjong Dojo title. It's a very long title. It's like Yuan Bura Jikochushin ha Katayama Masayuki no Mahjong Dojo.
Wow, that's a mouthful.
Yeah, Spatter, Super Street Fighter 2, 2, the new challengers, of course, classic. Tatsujin, and then for Sega Mega CD titles, we have Final Fight CD, the Wonder Mega Collection, and then relevant to us especially is the Lunar Eternal Blue and Lunar the Silver Star.
I don't know if they've confirmed those ones are in the West yet, though. They have to navigate the working designs issue.
Yeah, that's the thing. I don't know if they've confirmed that for the West. Have you heard anything, Chow, on that?
No, but if it's not there, then I'm not getting the American version.
Yeah, those are the big
on
ones.
the Amazon page for it doesn't have any details.
Yeah,
at all.
So, but hey, you know what? Are you excited, Chow? Nonetheless, if you're not gonna, you're still gonna get the ones with Lunar, no matter what, huh?
Yeah, I love Lunar. I mean, I could even talk about Lunar, but I'm not sure if anybody here has played Lunar.
I played the Silver Star Collection on PS1. I think that's what they were called.
Okay.
But that was a long time ago. I never played like the original releases in Japan.
Okay. I'm just gonna. Was it? It's kind of weird that we're having a gameplay session at the end of this talk.
Yeah, if you want to talk about it briefly, because like I don't think we're gonna mention it ever again.
Okay, but anyways,
yeah,
you played the remake of the Lunar Silver Star story.
I played. I don't know anything about Lunar aside from like the PS1 collection that like
wasn't there like a terrible GBA game or something?
I wouldn't call it terrible. It's just the PS1 game being downsized to a GBA, really.
Oh, okay.
But yes, it is. The Sega CD version is a completely different beast, because when they remade Lunar Silver Star for the PlayStation 1, they completely rewrote the story. The villains have different motives. The main character's powers are totally different, because in the remake, he's a specialized sword user, right? But in the original game, he's actually a magic user, and he's a very OP magic user in the original game. Like, everything has changed. There's a character named Nash that joins your party, and everybody hates him in the remake because he's always a little. I hate to say it, but everyone likes to call him a little bitch because he doesn't do anything. In the original Sega CD version, there's a part where he betrays you, and he does it for a very good cause in the Sega CD version. But that is completely scrapped out in the PlayStation remake. But yeah, there's totally.
I like how Chow is just like a font of knowledge when it comes to like version
so
differences of these, like even down to like story beats. Just insane. Chow, you're admirable.
I love retro games, so maybe that's why. Okay.
So yeah, it is on you back in October to grab this Sega Genesis or Mini. Yeah, Sega Genesis Mini 2 and report.
Oh my god. You're putting me on the trial.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you're the one who said like, "Hey, don't forget this." We're like, "All right, well, the onus is on you."
Okay, so that's basically on Lunar, right? On the first game, because totally different, totally two different games. If you played the PS1 version, you could also check out the Sega CD version. You'll get a completely different experience.
Okay, that's kind of like I guess my main question, was, well, is it significant enough too?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
But the second game there's not much different between the original and the remake story wise. But the Sega CD version in working design, they kind of changed the game not for the better, and a lot of people are upset about it. So they like to patch this out because in working design's point of view, they found that this game allows you to save anywhere for RPG, and they found that was too easy. So when they changed in the Sega CD version for the American release was that if you want to save, it costs you magic experience points to save. So if you want to level up, it's like you get gypped trying to save in the American version. I know that's
so not only are there console differences, but there's region differences.
Yes, working design keep making unnecessary changes. Sometimes they make the game way harder for no reason. Sometimes some of the gameplay is completely got messed up, like Silhouette Mirage. This is another game they localized, and they completely fucked up the difficulty. And people will say, do not recommend the working design version. But for Lunar, it's just that you can't save without like the magic experience things. And there are some weird jokes that people don't take too kindly in these old games in a retro perspective view. Like there's one NPC you talk to, and that person says, "You can call me Bill. My name is Bill Clinton." And hearing that in Lunar, you're like, "What the hell is this shit?"
Yeah, that's really not good. Yeah, that's weird.
But yeah, there's lots of these kind of things. So that's for Lunar. Lunar 2 is actually a lot better than the first game. It has a much deeper story. Gameplay is also a lot more expanded upon. But if you're just kind of playing it, I would kind of try the PlayStation version if you want like better cinematics, I guess. But I would still suggest the Sega CD version as a superior game. So yeah.
And so is the Sega CD version the version that's on this mini console then?
Yes.
In Japan, at least.
I guess we don't know for sure.
In the West. We don't know if they could give those working design rights, or they just put it and just didn't give a shit about them because they don't exist anymore, right?
Nope.
So yeah, that's all I got to say for Lunar. So yeah.
So look ahead to that for the Sega Genesis Mini 2, if it ends up being on the English version of the mini console. Otherwise, we'll just have Chow report from the Japanese version. And unless anyone has any other addendums, I think that kind of covers us.
I think we're good. I think we're good.
Thanks again for listening to another episode of the Tetracast. Thanks for welcoming me back, Josh, James, Adam, and Chow. We didn't have any new articles up on the site, but we have all the Fire Emblem Warriors guides, the Monster Hunter Sunbreak guides, the previews for Xenoblade Chronicles 3 and Live Alive are all up on the site, including all the news that we talked about on the podcast this week. You can join our Discord at discord.gg/RPG site. You can follow us on the social media channels on Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram. And we will be back next week, where I presume that a significant portion of the runtime will be talking all things Live Alive and whatever else comes out between now and then. If maybe Stranger of Paradise, if we have people have some time to get to the DLC on that as well. Until you hear from us next time, stay safe and take care. And we'll talk to you then.